there, this is Andrew, and I want to talk to you today about a couple other recent competitive card games that you may have heard of, and those are Lorcana, and there's a Lorcana card, and Star Wars Unlimited. There's a Star Wars Unlimited card. So I want to talk to you about both of these, um, and what they look like as a KeyForge player. Might even mention a couple other trading card games while we're in here. I guess it's worth giving a little bit of background. I think most people playing KeyForge have played some other games over the years. Not everybody though. I know there are some players like I think Z. This was really his first competitive card game. Which is pretty impressive. but for me, I didn't start out with KeyForge. I actually, long time ago, uh, played some tabletop Netrunner, the FFG reboot, and then at work got pulled in with some guys who were doing Magic the Gathering drafts. Did that for a while, and then decided that I would rather sink my time into more Netrunner actually than play Magic, and so I started playing Netrunner on a weekly basis at a local store. So that was kind of my jam until it kind of died. A lot of you will probably know Netrunner actually is still running. It's just not run by FFG anymore. But that was the time. That was when I switched over to KeyForge primarily. I dabbled in a couple other things. I dabbled in Star Wars Destiny, and I tried out Flesh and Blood and decided it really just wasn't for me. So I even played a game or two of SoulForge Fusion. There's a lot more games out there. Of course, I grew up collecting Pokemon cards, but I think I've played a total of 2 to 3 actual games of Pokemon in my life. But I collected a lot of the cards as a kid because I just thought it'd be so cool. So anyway, that's my background. Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited are two relatively new trading card games. And again, I just wanted to look at them from the perspective of a KeyForge player. What is similar or different? I'll even compare and contrast between the two a little bit. I'll start with Lorcana because it is, in my opinion, the simpler game. So in Lorcana, players are, well, it's worth saying, first of all, that Lorcana is a Disney-themed trading card game. And if you're looking for commercial success, that's a pretty good start. But Lorcana has players acting as Illumineers who summon glimmers of familiar Disney characters, and your job is to acquire lore, and the first player to 20 lore wins. So it's a race to 20. Characters come into play. It's interesting. Characters come into play ready, so that's actually closer to Magic, but you can't use them to do anything on the turn they come in on. So again, kind of like Magic. There is a significance to them coming in play ready though. So typically you have, the way you're supposed to do it, I guess, is you have your creatures that have been out, and then you have creatures that came in this turn, and at the end of your turn they would move up. But it's really just like summoning sickness in Magic. You just typically can't use a character to do anything on the turn that it came in. But more like Magic, really, you don't ready things until the start of your next turn, and it really matters whether a character is ready. Okay, well, I'll come back to that. So characters can quest to gain lore, which is how you win, and characters have a little indicator here of how much lore they get if they quest. And some characters have more than one. Here's Tinkerbell with 2. There's a Robin Hood with 4. For example, here he is. There might even be more, I don't know, but that seems like that's all that would fit there. So a creature can, or a character rather, can quest to gain lore, which gets you closer to winning. Cards have a cost up here, and you have to pay that cost. Notice not every card has this little inkwell symbol around it. Once per turn, you can ink a card from your hand, turning it face down in your inkwell, and then you can exhaust those to pay the cost of other cards. So turn 1, the most you could have is 1. Turn 2, you could have 2, etc. And you kind of decide when you want to stop. This basically works like mana in Magic, with the exception that everything is colorless, and you decide. You don't have to worry about having the right color, which is quite nice actually. So, okay. So I recently did a draft of Lorcana while I was at a game convention, and they didn't have KeyForge running there. So I did a Lorcana draft, and they do a 4-pack draft. Every pack is 12 cards. It's about, if you've done drafting before, or if you've played Seven Wonders, which is based on how drafting works. Seven Wonders was actually inspired by Magic drafting. Then this will be familiar to you. You open a pack, you take a card, you pass the rest to the left, and then you take the 11 cards the person on your right just passed. You take one, pass the rest to the left. Keep doing that until you run out of cards. Open a second pack, take a card, pass to the right, and then you do that all over again to get to 4 packs. So I did that, and then played 3 rounds of Swiss. I ended up, it was very funny, a couple people bailed after game 2, a few people actually. And so I was 2-0 at the end of game 2, but then got pared down hard because people just weren't there, and then lost in game 3. So that was fun. To somebody who hadn't won all their games up to that point. But sometimes that's how it goes. It was interesting to me. Lorcana is like KeyForge in that it's a race. You can deal with opponents' creatures, but that's not your primary thing. Your primary job is you want to get to, in this case, to 20 lore. But you can use creatures for removal if that's better. So, if your opponent has a card that's if I could remove a 3 lore quester with Huey, then that's better for me, right? I keep my big ones while he doesn't. So it's similar to KeyForge in that, and feels very much like there's some cards that feel like, oh, these are clearly designed to be good at at efficiently removing your opponent's cards. But a weird thing is you cannot challenge your opponent's characters unless they're exhausted, or exerted is the Lorcana terminology. So the turn a character comes out, you can't remove it. You actually have to wait, and they need to use it once. And then you could challenge it and remove it, which actually, to me, felt like a lot less player agency. I do think it's probably a nicer play experience. It's probably not that nice for a kid to constantly have Okay, I played a card, it got removed before I could do anything with it. I could see wanting to protect kids from that, but and it felt to me like it really reduced player agency. What's the point of my setup if I just can't interact with my opponent's cards until they've used them at least once? Okay, but again, that is very much coming as a KeyForge player. And on the race side, it is definitely a race, but there are no milestones, and so KeyForge has, with the checkpointing system that keys are, provides a really interesting tempo game, along with the design space being available of being able to manipulate key costs, right? That's a thing you can do. And in Lorcana, none of that is present, so it's a much simpler, I would even say flatter game in that regard. Yeah, obviously it's very different. The cards have costs. That makes for a more incremental game. KeyForge really rewards you for hand shaping, and if you can set up kind of really powerful turns out of your hand that can be surprising or whatnot, and it's very swingy. KeyForge is very swingy. Lorcana is not very swingy. There are some cards that might let you reduce your opponent's lore, but it's felt like not a lot. And so as you're inching toward that goal, you're getting to that goal. And so if you can inch a little quicker, you're going to get there. And that again, to me, that felt like a little less player agency because once there was an advantage, it was very hard. Now, I did have a couple of games. One of my matchups was against a guy, and we were playing best of 3 against a guy who he had a strategy of most of his characters were cost 1, 2, and 3, and so he got a lot of characters to the board very early. You would call that a flood strategy, and so he was just able to do so much so early that, by the time I could slow him down, he was at like 16 lore. And then if he has 2 turns of play a 2, I can't attack, I can't challenge it. And then he quests with it. That's it. That's something like that is what happened. But then in game 2, I focused a lot more on removal early, and game 3 also, and was able to get to where his engine slowed and he couldn't produce more lore very quickly at all. He was, he could play something that would quest for 1. He'd get to use it once and then I'd remove it. My removal guys were not getting killed, banished as part of the trade-off, so it worked out. That was actually pretty interesting, but it was extremely incremental compared to KeyForge, where these would have been big swings. In Lorcana, you have a 2-color deck building restriction, so there are 4 colors in the game: yellow, blue, green, and red, and you can use 2 of them. That's it. So, and in draft, that restriction was removed. So really, in draft was you can use whatever you want, and everything has this colorless cost. Compared with in a KeyForge draft, which is an official format, you really would be restricted to you need to get your 3 houses filled, or in a Magic draft, you're looking at how do I make sure that I have a good mixture so that I'll be able to have enough mana. Um, anyway, it's fine, but it kind of ended up making the colors not mean anything for the draft. Okay. Also very different from KeyForge, and this factors into the incrementality of it versus KeyForge, which is very swingy. You get one draw per turn. So, and again, I would just say there, overall, it feels to me like KeyForge has a lot more going on as a game. I do, compared to Magic, like the resource inking. um, and I prefer the incrementality over say Magic situation where that you get into where neither player has a good move, so everybody just kind of sits and waits for the balance to tip. Um, I could see somebody really enjoying that. It's not for me, but so here there usually there is a good move to advance your agenda, but uh, overall just a lot less going on than KeyForge. Simpler, um, which might, I don't mean that necessarily as a knock. It might make it a really good fit for some players. I would happily play in a draft again. I wouldn't pursue it the way I have KeyForge. Okay, so now let's talk about Star Wars Unlimited. So Star Wars Unlimited, on the other hand, it's funny. It is, I guess, Disney, because Star Wars is Disney. That's not even a fresh joke anymore. That's an old joke. But in Star Wars Unlimited, players are commanding forces in the Star Wars universe, and so you have a base that you're protecting. It has health, and you have a leader to go with it. And you start the game with your base and your leader in play, and you are, at the end of the day, what you need to do is destroy your opponent's base. So you need to deal damage to your opponent's base. And all the common bases are 30 points. So then you have a deck. I believe it's in constructed it's 50 cards. In drafting it's 30. But you have a deck and you get cards in it, like Bendu here is a unit. You tend to want a lot of units because they're how you actually advance your win condition generally. Here's Chopper. Star Wars Rebel fans will like those ones. Here's Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, so you play units out, and here you're going to recognize some stuff. Units have a cost up here in the upper left. How do you pay costs? Well, once per turn, you can turn one of your cards face down into a resource from your hand. And then you can spend the resources to pay the costs. So, and actually, I do like Star Wars Unlimited has a draw 2. You may turn 1 to resource, which is kind of nice because toward the late game, where things tend to stall out in a game like this, and in Lorcana they did, in the late game you get to where you have 6 or 7 ink, but you're only drawing 1 card per turn. So if it's a 3 cost card, why did you ink so many other cards? Here though, you're drawing 2 and potentially turning 1 to a resource, and so that means at the end of the game, when you have enough resources, you're drawing 2 cards a turn, which is more fun. But and I should say, you can use a creature, or you can use your units to attack. and deal their damage either to a base or to another unit. And there are features like, so Sentinel says my base can't be attacked in this arena. And the arena, 2 arenas, is a really interesting feature of this game. You have ground and air, which is pretty thematic for Star Wars because that's pretty typical in the Star Wars universe that if there's a big thing happening, there's a ground battle and an air space battle. I haven't shown you any space units, but they exist, trust me. So, so you can, if a unit has Sentinel, it protects your base and your other units in that arena that it's in. So, yeah. So ultimately, you're trying to deal damage to your opponent's base. The turn structure here, though, is really interesting, and I think it's the thing that makes me happiest about this game because it's very similar to the turn action system from Star Wars Destiny. And I don't know if something else used it before that, but that's where I first encountered it. And the turn structure is this. At the start of a turn, everything readies, and then you can, one player has the initiative, they take an action, and then their opponent takes an action. And then they take an action, and then their opponent takes an action. So play a card, that's an action. You play a card, now your opponent gets to take an action. But only one. They could attack the card you just played. They could play a card on their side. It's up to them. But you play a card, they play a card. Okay, now it's your turn again. So it's very quick back and forth. And it leads to a lot of tight decisions about, okay, my opponent has 3 units on the board. I can remove one of them early, which will protect my Sentinel or whatever. You know, there's a lot of decision space there in this kind of close, snappy decision making. I really like it. So, and the turning a card to a resource isn't part of that action flow. It happens outside of that at the start of the turn. So, so you end up with this, yeah, pretty nice resource system. Again, works like mana in Magic, works the same as ink in Lorcana. It's like mana, but colorless. You're getting to decide what cards you don't need. True to FFG form, units do come into play exhausted, but then they'll ready later. And then there's a cool feature, this epic action, when you get to enough resources, your leader comes into play as a unit. And so, and it is a pretty powerful unit. So that's a pretty cool feature. Okay. And they come into play ready too, so it's like, bam, they're there, they're doing stuff, which is fun. Deck building is interesting here because so units have a cost. In this case, this unit would actually cost me 10, and here's why. Your base and your leader provide what aspect icons, and cards that you would want to play have aspect icons. If the aspect icons on the cards that you want to play are covered in your base and leader, then you only pay the cost of the unit. However, for each icon that's not covered, you pay an extra 2. So for example, let me find a unit that would actually be at just its normal cost. Okay. So here's an event called Resupply. It has a green icon, and look, I have a green icon on my base, so I just pay 3. Obi-Wan here, actually no, not Obi-Wan. Oh, look, I had no choice. Is a trick. It has a yellow and a black. Oh, look, I have a yellow and a black. By the way, the green, blue, yellow, and red represent like vigilance, aggression, other stuff. Black represents villainy, and then there's like a tan for heroic. So so this is Boba Fett's a villain. Shocking. So this I have good. I only have to pay the 7. Fallen Lightsaber, on the other hand, I have villainy. That's fine, but I don't have red, so I would have to pay an extra 2. I would have to pay 5 resources to play Fallen Lightsaber. Bendu, you'd have to pay 10 total to play. So it's a nice system. I really like it as a system because it says you can do whatever you want, but it will cost you. So there's never a card you couldn't put in a deck. There are cards that you could put in a deck and you would never play. And I really like that. Or hey, you could have this just in case, for whatever situation you're worried about, but you're going to pay more for it. So I think that's a neat system. Again, it is like a race, right? You're trying to deal this much damage to the base. That feels a little more thematic. The fighting works like in KeyForge. Damage is persistent. The main difference that's worth noting is that units, and this is true in Lorcana too, units have an attack value and a health value, whereas in KeyForge those are just one stat. But in both of them, actually, damage is persistent in both Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited. This also is less swingy because there's not board clears, there's not, take all damage on your base over 6 and put it on your opponent's base or something like that. There's no checkpoints here. But that action back and forth is real tense. I really like it. Obviously, this has deck building. There are costs, so it's different in that regard. But I think this is pretty good. I read a review on Board Game Geek for Star Wars Destiny that said that there's nothing new in here, but it's perfect. And I think that's pretty good. It feels to me like if you like this sort of game, this does a lot of things right and fixes a lot of problems that other games have. So I hope it does well. I'm hoping to get to play it more over the next few years, but we'll see. If I were to jump ship to any game right now, it would probably be this one. I'm not. I'm pretty stuck on KeyForge, and I think that I really like that swinginess. But as a secondary game, I really like this, and I would show up to a draft anytime I could. Special mention, special place in my heart will always be for Netrunner, because where I would say I would agree with that reviewer that Star Wars Unlimited kind of gets everything right. Netrunner did everything different and was just such a different game that it's worth exploring sometime if you haven't. Okay, so again, as a KeyForge player, I would say both these games a little more incremental, less swingy, less going on overall. But Star Wars Unlimited, I think, has more going on, is more complex, a lot more interesting than Lorcana. The art is growing on me. It's growing on me. Yeah, all right. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed and that you have a good day, and get out there and forge some keys.